On today's episode of At Work With, I'm joined by Craig Strachan, CEO of Novel, Europe's leading independent podcast company. And honestly, I'm not even sure where to begin. Within 10 minutes of walking into the building on our way to the studio, Craig was stopped about 3 times. At one point, a cleaner came running down the hall just to give him the biggest hug and tell him how much she missed him. That moment alone spoke volumes, not just about the legacy that he left behind at Amazon, but also about the kind of person he was. In our conversation, Craig was kind, funny, and deeply insightful. He spoke with real vulnerability about his journey, his passion for storytelling, and the commitment that he has to people around him. I loved every minute of our conversation, and I hope that you do too. So please welcome Craig. Craig, before we dive into the world of audio and your career and everything, I would love to start from the beginning. And I'd love to understand about you, where you grew up, and what stands out the most about your childhood.
So I'm from Bedford, it's just north of London. I grew up in like a little village. Yeah, what stands out for me? Like, it's pretty, I don't know, normalish childhood, I guess. Did well at school, enjoyed being at school, which is quite rare. Love learning. I've been around friends and all of that stuff. Yeah, very close family. So that's still a big part of my life, particularly my grandparents who kind of grew up around us, and we're always spending time with them. So yeah, like fairly normal. I guess fairly sheltered, right? We didn't go into the big smoke, even though we were like half an hour away, 40 minutes away. We were kind of like fairly isolated in that respect. But yes, like the first time I kind of grew up was when I went to university. But yeah, that's kind of my background.
What did you want to do when you were younger?
I wanted to be an accountant.
Which is like, I was not expecting that, because podcasting didn't exist at that time.
Yeah, that's that. And like kids are like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be like something big and fancy. And I'm like, I want to be an accountant. And my parents were like, are you okay? Like, you can dream bigger. And I was like, no, because I love maths. And even now, I love doing some quick maths. But that changed quite quickly when I started doing more maths. Then I dabbled a bit when I was at school with performing arts.
I would have expected something like that.
I always said if my parents had pushed me, I could have been a child star, but they didn't. So
Was there any offers?
I once took myself to an audition, which I saw on The Stage, which was like a publication where they had a load of auditions. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take myself off. I'm going to become a star. And I didn't get cast in the main role. I was like an extra. Yeah. And it was a sex education film for schools. So that was kind of the peak of my acting career, or not. And then several musicals, but I can't sing. And so I'd like to think I could do it, but I just don't have the skills. That's fine.
And who would you say in those early years, say before you came into the big smoke, had the biggest influence on you?
My grandparents, my nana, grandma. But I have quite a lot of strong female leaders or like people in my life. But yeah, definitely them. Spent a lot of time with them. My grandma brought up my mom and her sister kind of late years by herself. She's a very strong woman, but like has such a joy of life. She's still alive. She writes poems, she does Sudoku and all of that stuff. So she still continues to be a big source of inspiration.
Piece of advice that your nana gave you that still?
I just think we always had fun. And I think I always, like, that's a big thing for me, like enjoying things. And when you don't enjoy things, like that's an opportunity to regroup and reconsider. So that I just remember having fun.
And then Then, of course, you moved over.
I did university in Warwick. I shouldn't have got in. I didn't get the grades. I did German and business, but I think it's because it was a German degree. Yeah. Ironically, the grade I didn't get was in German. But I think it's because of the language and because it was German, which isn't the sexiest of languages, and I got in. And that was a real changing point in my life, because I got to grow up and be a human being, and meet friends who are still my closest friends today. Yeah. Eat things and eat loads and realize that you probably should exercise. So I did German and business at Warwick.
And then when I was going through your career history, of course, I knew of you at Amazon, but pre-Amazon, you kind of dabbled in a few things. You were in marketing at BT, and then you went into marketing and then trading at Sky. So how did you go from all of that into the audio world?
Yeah, so I like marketing. It was creative and didn't involve any performance skills. Got on a grad scheme out of university at BT, which at the time was still kind of in its older fuddy-duddy phase. It's like now kind of evolved as actually evolved quite well as a brand. My first job was marketing phone lines. So like back in the day, you had a landline, right? And it was about marketing phones, but also like what you charge people as a setup fee. It was so crazy when I think about it now, but that's where the world was. And then I was part of launching the internet the internet, broadband there, and fiber broadband. So like that was a really good couple of years. And then I went from there to Sky because they're quite similar companies. So that was kind of a natural thing. And I also got my first ever gardening leave, 4 weeks, which I had my tonsils out, which is I'd never recommend anyone do if they have gardening leave. And then at Sky, I kind of moved around a bit, Sky Go as it was then, and then I worked in Sky Sports and Sky Movies for quite a lot of that time, doing a lot of more what we call proposition work, so building kind of packages that people might like. So we worked with Disney, we worked with Champions League and the Premier League on doing how much we should bid for those things. So that was really interesting, but all of it was entertainment. And I really liked kind of that evolution into entertainment. So when I was there, I first got asked about a job in books at Amazon. And I was like, I don't really read, right? I've just started, but like, I can't sit still. Audiobooks, yes, less reading. So I was like, that doesn't fit me. So it didn't work. And then, I went to join the AA, which isn't on my CV.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have found it.
Yeah.
And it was a really good head of innovation, I think the role was. It was a company that I was like, oh, I was attracted by the salary and I got a great mortgage off of it. I was there for 6 weeks and I was like, this just isn't me culturally. It's quite an old organization. They were trying to get a lot of innovation and younger people in, and it just didn't work. So I was only there for 4 or 5 months. But in that time, the music team here had just launched Prime Music and we're building out that team. And actually what that gave me was then the opportunity to come into Amazon and be right at the beginning of a product and service and be part of that journey for what became 8 years. So that felt much more me, and I had to go through the interview process, which
was in person at that time.
Yeah, which was in person, and I'm a big fan of it. Less so when I was on the other side having to interview people because it is it's a lot. But like, so that was how I came to Amazon. And again, it was kind of music to kind of tangentially back into entertainment. I like music, but like it was just such an interesting,
sort of like a squiggly career almost.
Like, yeah, a little bit.
Represent themselves. But where in that point, because obviously you went into music and then you ended up becoming like the global head of the podcast kind of industry within Amazon. Where was it in that journey that you thought, hey, this podcasting can actually kick off and actually it's not really a niche anymore?
Yeah. I like podcasts, right? And that I think that's
because you don't like to read.
Not because I don't like to read, but yeah, I like learning things from podcasts, but I also just like the entertainment.
Yeah.
And as evolved now into fandom and communities, I just enjoyed it. And actually we're like, cool. So when we launched podcasts, I was like, I would like to do that. And the great thing about Amazon I found was that even when I was on the marketing side, I did 3 or 4 different roles because as the business grew, you found yourself in roles because it is such a, it's a big organization, but it's a collection of startups under one umbrella, right? And so you are doing many jobs. And one of the big things that I said about going from Sky to Amazon was at Sky at the time, you would say what your job was and 3 or 4 people would say they did the same thing as you. Whereas at Amazon, you'd say what your job was and you're actually doing 4 people's jobs. It's kind of the other way around. And so I found this opportunity to do branding, which again, I was more creative. And so I wrote a brand positioning statement for Amazon Music at the time. And then I ended up being the brand lead for Europe for Amazon Music. And that was like more campaign stuff. And I was like, great, that's very different to what I used to do. And then when podcasts came along, I was like, I love podcasts. Can I do this? And obviously a bit back and forth, but then I ended up being the podcast lead for Europe and then latterly globally. But that was so exciting. Like, I just love the opportunity that if you put your hand up and you put yourself out there, like you could do it. You've just got to find the right way to get to the people, the decision makers. But
that faith in yourself. So kind of like that, I'm just going to try it.
Yeah, trust your gut. And I think, failure in a failure, that's not really a word. Like, it's all learning, right? Like you learn stuff. And fortunately, it worked out well here. And we got to build out. What I loved about it was you were in different cultures at different times. Yeah. And the podcast market in particular is very different in Japan as it is to the UK, as it is to Canada, for example. So I loved that, being able to kind of be across all of these different cultures, because back to my German days and learning German, and I lived there, like I loved culture, because that language is culture and they're intertwined. I just loved all that stuff. And there was no Taylor Swift of podcasting, as I have been quoted as saying, although ironically she broke the internet with her podcast appearance the other week. But like, by which I mean, like, maybe Joe Rogan aside, outside the English speaking market, everything is so local. And I love that about podcasting. It's quite frustrating when you're trying to scale things, but like it's so local and it's so culturally relevant.
And it's so relatable.
100%.
And it gives access to people who may not have it otherwise.
Yeah, I think, and lots more people need to know about it.
During that time, were there any highlights, especially during your kind of tenure at Amazon, going through multiple roles? Is there anything really that stands out?
Well, we launched, I guess, I've got 2 or 3. One was launching Amazon Music Unlimited as it is now. So that was insane. Like you would be in a room, just launched, Echo had just launched, or Alexa just launched in the UK. So I had 8 or 9 devices in a room and I was checking the user experience, and it was like something I'd never done before. It was great. So, and you'd stay up all night. This whole idea of launches, like it was so, I don't know if I'd do it now, I'm too old, but it was so invigorating, and you'd stay up for 24 hours, 36 hours, and you really cared about this product. So that was one thing. And then obviously launching podcasts was great. And then I think my biggest thing was this playlist called Proud that we did. So I since I came to Amazon, I had come out as well as and that's been a big thing in terms of me just being able to be more comfortable with myself. So that was a bit of a journey. But one of the things I helped do was build more relationships with Pride in London, but other Pride organisations around the world, and how we support Pride and how we showed up as Amazon Music. And this again is one of these things, if you're passionate about something and you make a case, you can do it, right? Just get in front of the wrong people, make a case. Someone can say no, but that's the worst that can happen. And so we built up this playlist called Proud, which now gets revised every single year. And that's a really big part of how we show up, not just during Pride, but actually it's about how we continually have an always on support for LGBTQ plus artists through the year. Dog isn't just for Christmas, Pride isn't just for June or July, depending on where you are. So that's probably been the biggest thing that I'm proud of. And I saw that recently. Motin, and I was like, so happy it's still going. That's great.
And it kind of stays with you. Like, I was part of that.
That was my idea, right? And that is when you come back to like struggling about things, like you can get, if you have an idea, make it happen. And you're in a bigger organisation, so it's a bit easier, but you still have to fight for resources, you have to fight for budget, you have to fight against everything else.
People have this perception that because Amazon, they can do anything. To be fair, we can do anything, but there's a lot of work that goes into just being able to, we don't just produce things overnight.
No, like the docs, the PR FAQs, which are all like super relevant. And I've taken a lot of those practices with me into what I do now. Like they're all there to make sure that you're doing the right thing. The whole working back schedule, it's all great grounding.
See, nicely onto Novel. So you were in a big global role at Amazon, and then you ended up leaving for Novel, which at that time was still relatively new. Started in 2019. It's a really big move. And working in Amazon at the moment, the role that you were in and the stability and the security to just leave. What was your mindset? Like, just
look, things don't come up often that are exciting. And this was exciting for a couple of reasons. One, my mentor who I met at Amazon works with the company, and I love him, and he's a big part of kind of how I make decisions. And I was like, like there's almost like that rubber stamp of somebody being like, this is a really good thing. And I was like, okay, that's great. And then secondly, like it's the opportunity to learn something. Not that I hadn't stopped learning here. There's always opportunity to learn at Amazon. But things got to a point where I was like, this feels like it could be a great place to lead. The team are in a really good place. And there's this saying at Amazon, which I'm sure you've heard, of a two-way door decision. Like, this isn't a one-way door. Come back if there's a job. Like this isn't the end. This isn't like this isn't the only decision I can make, right? And so I did it. So it was like, 18 months ago now, I left, and like it's been a very different experience, and I've learned so much and still learn every day.
So when we go into Novel, and obviously I've been looking, and I knew about the company because we'd spoken obviously before for other stuff, and it's produced obviously brilliant podcasts, and I'm listening to one at the moment. Part of my research,
which one are you
recommended so much, The Girlfriends.
Oh yeah,
I'm on Craig. I'm on the train, and I'm like, like it's so. I think the storytelling and it's so dramatic. I'm almost like watching it.
We call it cinematic audio,
and it's brilliant, right? And it's also won an award, and it's also been adapted for TV. How do you see this industry evolving in the next couple of years?
It's interesting, right? Like we're talking at a time where there'll be some quite big shifts in the podcasting industry, namely, and in the last couple of weeks. Wondery, which are one of the biggest podcasting production companies, has kind of been somewhat shut down or dispersed into narrative, which is what we do a lot of, into Audible, and talent-led stuff into kind of a talent services team. So it's really interesting. Like I guess I see all the all the pillars of entertainment merging. Like in some respects, I call it content, because there is no such thing as audio only or video only. Like everything is competing with itself, social, streaming, podcast, whatever that may be. Obviously, you've got to move into video on a lot of things. And that works with a lot of celebrity fronted podcasts. It doesn't work with things like that we've traditionally done, like really heavy storytelling, for a couple of reasons, namely like effective you're producing a show if you create an audio, a visual version of that. But also part of the reason why we invest in those shows is that we can then retain and sell the rights on for TV adaptation. That's a big part of how the business model could be. So yeah, we're at a really interesting time. There's different types of podcasts. I'm interested to see how the Wondery thing plays out with Audible. We have projects with them. The show called Kill List last year, which is the Guardian's #1 podcast of 2024. Which is one of my favorite things that we've done, and that took years to make. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Well, I was going to say, sorry, I'm listening to The Girlfriend Addicted. I think I should listen to like multiple episodes in a row, but don't tell me what happens because I'm still listening to it.
Well, there's also like 2 more series of it.
Yeah, exactly. So. But it's really interesting, I think, from your perspective, being in that seat. Why was it that The Girlfriends then, is now potentially, becoming a TV adaptation?
Yeah, like I think a lot of instances you're kind of taking a bet. Like our team, we have a dedicated development team within Novel, and not many other companies do. And it makes sense because we do a lot of due diligence on the stories we're telling, the people that we have contributing to a podcast. And that's a really big part of what makes it successful. And then almost validating that will work, kind of a TV market, film market level as well, by looking at what else is out there. So we have a good gut, I think, of understanding. And then we work with commissioners like iHeart, Wondery, and they're sometimes very specific about what they want because they also have a great idea about what sells into market. And so it's almost a collaboration between the two of us. We come up with all the ideas. We'll talk about it. And they were like, oh, this bit we like, this bit we don't. Come up with another idea that hits that. And we get somewhere. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a lot of it, you never know the success of a podcast before. Yeah. We're lucky because we have had quite a lot of hits. And that's because the way we tell podcasts, the way it is. But like podcasting is, there's a podcast just everywhere you turn these days.
Like this one, staying on the Novel journey, and you've been there 18 months, you said, right? So what has it been like? What would you say one of the most challenging moments?
I think there's definitely a bit of moving from a massive organization to a small organization, right? I think on my first day, I was like, oh, can you just want to meet me at reception? And they were like, laughing. Like, there's a code for the door. We're on the third floor, up 6 flights of stairs, and we're in an office, which now I love, but like there's 2 toilets, which I can't get over, a kitchen and 1 meeting room which doesn't have air conditioning. But now there's something really nice about it because it's kind of got that startup vibe, and it is very creative and not. But like that was a really big transition for me, like going from the comforts of it.
When you moved there?
I think they were like, oh no, this guy's gonna get a real awakening. But I actually love it now.
It's like the rich kid that goes into the suburbs.
Maybe. But I'm a man of the people, so where I got there.
No, I saw that. You stop at 5 trying to fall.
Exactly. So I leave a legacy of fun. But yes, that was one thing. And then like I think maybe it's quite unfair to say, but depending on who you are, but it's quite hard. It's quite easy to hide in a big organization, whereas in a small org, like everything starts with you. And I think that didn't take me a while, but that was something I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is you. These calls are you. Like, you just got to make this decision.
Yeah.
Then it's about leaning on a lot of things I learned here, being data-led, having the right mechanisms in place, what's the right process to be able to make sure that you can make those decisions timely and the right ones.
And say in your move in the last year, and obviously before that when you were running like the global podcast scene, what did you see as one of the biggest shifts in like listener habits or podcast discovery?
Podcasts are still growing, right? And so like the biggest shift I think is the way they're monetized, from like traditional advertising to now being much more subscription led, bonus content, all of that stuff, which is where it becomes much more competitive and at play with something like a Netflix or other subscription services. So that's definitely, and then evolving into live tours. Podcasts are books, they're hats, they're t-shirts, like they're board games. There's so many things.
The advent of like video podcasts, I feel like everyone's doing video now.
Yeah.
So it's like a podcast, but it's a live production as well.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. Like, number one, where it makes sense, and particularly in celebrity fronted ones, like that becomes your social content. You can put it on YouTube, which is one of the biggest growing platforms, but it's also extra reach. And then it helps build your audience for a show. Like I help out a friend of mine, Dino, who runs a company called Persephonica. They started a podcast festival last year, so second year was this year, called Crosswires in Sheffield, and it's live shows of podcasts over 2 to 3 days, 3 nights and days, and it's just absolutely ramo. And it's so interesting to see how that is evolved. And I'm really happy to see it because, podcasts can finally become a big thing and you can actually make meaningful money from it. And the rest is politics selling out the O2. Beyonce, the rest is politics. Like, they had a competition, but they were selling T-shirts of Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, and it was like really who could sell out first, and they're both sold out. Like, let's love that it's become a thing. And I mentioned this word earlier, fandom. That podcasts they're building fandom, and that becomes really interesting as a production.
Diary of a CEO, like flashcards and merch and the bonus content.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of
it's a whole universe of things. And while we were at Amazon, we took the team from Help I Sexted My Boss to Benidorm, and we did like a competition with them to bring some of their fans to Benidorm, which is a really eye-opening experience. But to see some of the engagement on some of that stuff, and that was 3 years ago now, like, and what had grown so much since. But they did a live show when we were in Sheffield. It was
almost like a pseudo concert, isn't it?
It was, and like everyone gets dressed up. It was amazing. So so that's really exciting.
Where do you see roles of independents like Novel kind of in that? Obviously big players have so much more, like you said, infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, we work a lot with the big companies. I think that's kind of where we've continued to grow, which is doing stuff with them together, and a lot of that's commissioned. But we've learned a lot, like as and when we develop our own original stuff. We've got a pretty good idea of what will work based on what we've done so far, but also lots of insights. So independents are really important, like for podcasting, also for any industry. And there have been a few that have kind of gone away recently, Pineapple Street in the US being a big one this year. So we need to just make sure that we are working together with commissioners to make sure that what they're off in terms of both payment terms, in terms of how much budget they're paying, helps to support the industry, because it can get very hard with particularly the bigger players who are like, very hard on how they work with suppliers. I won't mention any names.
So you guys talk a lot about, and I've spoken before about the cross-media development and kind of owning the IP if you work on the podcast. Where do you think the biggest growth area will be, say, in the next 2 years?
Live events and merchandise.
Yeah. Because it is growing like anything I've seen. And I've been listening to podcasts for the past 10, 12 years. Before they were like popular and part of work culture.
Yeah,
exactly. So I used to drive a lot. Just listen, because I couldn't listen to music anymore. I used to get headaches. So I thought I'd been listening to something else. And I started listening to podcasts.
And so that's kind of, obviously, a lot of that is kind of more always on podcasts, as you would say. And then within the narrative space, what we've tried to do with things like The Girlfriend, which you'll see, is that we always have something that's going on in that feed. We call it a feed, right? So you've got series 1, then you've got series 2, you've got series 3. Then we do individual episodes of The Girlfriends as well. So we create these fans around. So we create these fans around narrative shows as well, which then help us to then build opportunities to monetize it.
And then kind of coming out of that, and one of the things when I was reading through and doing my research, you guys are part of the Equality and Audio Pact. So you signed that, and I actually didn't know that existed, so I was pleasantly surprised to see that. How important is it for you and Novel as a company that the industry makes spaces for diverse voices?
Yeah, like it's like one of the most important things. I think again, like that journey for me of coming out and understanding who I was. And I've been in cultures where I hadn't been able to do that. In fact, was kind of not bullied, but like the culture was very homophobic in my instance. And so like my big thing as a leader is to create a culture which is as representative as it can be, but is as comfortable as it can be for as many people as possible. That's really important for me. Like we have we do regular surveys that within Novel, and one of the biggest things for me is how comfortable people feel at work, and that's one of the most important metrics for me. Because even if one person says something, like we need to have a conversation around where somebody doesn't feel like they're accepted at work or they don't feel comfortable at work. That's like the number one important thing.
And do you think that's changing in this industry, that you are seeing more diverse voices, better inclusivity?
I think so, but like it can be better, right? And there are organizations within who are trying to drive that further, and I will try and support them where I can, be that personally or through Novel. There's an organization called Content is Queen, which is kind of heroing female voices, female voice of color within the podcasting industry. There's other groups as well, which kind of focus on Black creators. Those need to be there, but like, how do we make sure that we are, as employers, looking at getting the most kind of diverse people? Like, for example, when we tell stories which are maybe involving people of a certain background, we will make sure we have producers on there who are representative of the stories we're telling, because it doesn't make sense, right, to do it any other way. That's really important, because it helps build trust with contributors. It just makes for a more authentic story. Diversity inclusion is one of my biggest things.
It takes me on really well, actually, onto the next question about your leadership style and how it's evolved over time.
Yeah.
And it's quite, thank you for being open and sharing. So I would say like pre-coming out to post-coming out.
Yeah.
How has that impacted leadership style? Because it seems like that was quite a turn.
Yeah. I wasn't, I think I was always wary. When you are closeted, as it were, you're always wary of being caught out. So you wouldn't necessarily put yourself out there as much. I say that I was still incredibly loud and I haven't changed at all. But like, I think be able to come out and accept that. And I was 30 when I did that, right? So it's only like nearly 10 years ago. There's a certain bit of like, okay, cool, I feel comfortable. And so, but I've learned a lot. Like, I gave lots of shits when I first like was leading a team. I would listen to everybody and take everyone, and then you'd never be able to satisfy everybody. And like everybody would come to me, and so I'm incredibly open, and I always will be. But I think open in terms of letting people come and talk to me. But yeah, my style has evolved in that I think I'm able to make decisions a lot quicker. Whereas before, I would try and make sure every single person was really happy, which you can never do. Like, I just have to trust my gut, and if someone has a problem, we can chat about it, but we can agree to disagree. As long as I'm not offending anybody or being in any way malicious, like that's the most important thing for me. Like, my relationships are built on trust. People do things because they trust me and I trust them, and that's how I think you build long. And trust is really important to me.
So then, outside of work, what keeps you grounded? Because your work, being a CEO, stress, the stress levels and the pressure. What keeps you like just Craig outside of work?
I do a lot of exercise, which I've learned is kind of like my way to like wind up but wind down. So I'll always do something in the morning, and then where I can, I'll do stuff in the evening as well. I listen to podcasts, obviously. The biggest, like this year, I think as I've got into this role, the Mel Robbins podcast in particular, and the audiobook or paperback, Let Them Theory, like I am all about that, has fundamentally changed the way that I like communicate with myself more than anyone, and particularly how hard I am on myself, because I used to take all that feedback that people had on board, and it would really slow me down and a lot of mental load. Actually, let them. Like it's so funny. Like, I mean, there are different views on the theory, but like it's really worked for me. So I do a lot of that. Traveling. I've got like 6, 7 godchildren. There's always one within 10 minutes of me somewhere. So like I spend a lot of time with friends and family. Yeah, that's kind of it.
And personal, professional, but what's been one of the most, you'd say, humbling moments of your career?
I think, mastering the German language was something. I never really understood it till I went there. And as a result, like now I speak German quite a lot. I've been on German podcasts all the time. Like that's great. So I do spend a lot of time listening to German podcasts and watching German stuff. Like that's been not necessarily humbling, but that's been great. But I think like the proud stuff, like seeing stuff that you've built, like I always have stuff I like. I like doing stuff that people can see or hear, and doing stuff like that has been really being able to look back at things which are going on. I love that.
Amazing. And if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what do you think that would be?
Yeah. Don't overthink things, maybe, because I would do that a lot. And trust your gut.
Yeah.
And have fun. I do things to have fun now, and I do and get paid. My main thing is this going to be fun? And if it isn't, is it worth it? And if it's not, cool, that's not for me, but that's for someone else.
And if there's an impact that you would hope to leave on the podcast industry, do you think you'd want that impact to be?
I would love to help and grow diverse podcast production kind of staffings, just the resourcing within podcasting, but also the stories which are told. Like, I think it's very important for me that I can use whatever access I have to be able to do that.
I'm going to make it a bit more fun now.
Great, have fun.
A bit heavy. So we've got a quick fire round to end. It'll be a series of 9-ish questions.
Yeah.
First thing that comes to mind, right?
Okay,
Don't think too much. Ready?
Yeah.
Right. Morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
Coffee or tea?
Tea, unless it's with vodka and Kahlua.
Spotify or Amazon Music?
Amazon Music.
First podcast you ever listened to?
Oh, cereal, literally the gateway.
A podcast you would never miss?
There's
Oh, I heard of that one. Kill list or the girlfriends?
Kill list.
Dream dinner guest. I would.
Dawn French. Literally the first that came to my mind.
Best
Or
advice.
Nelson Mandela, sorry.
Best advice from a mentor.
From a mentor.
From a mentor.
I think just have fun stuff.
Well, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It was such a lovely
I appreciate
conversation.
it. Thank you.